Why don't you just quickly share for these good people your ambitious goal?
Well, we're running a campaign. It's called Half in 10. The idea is to cut the poverty rate in America, this is domestic poverty, in half in 10 years.
In half?
In half. And totally achievable. We can eliminate poverty as we know it in a generation. But what's required is a comprehensive effort to do it with a set of ideas that we know empirically work. Most of them aren't complicated. It's raising the state minimum wages, local minimum wages, state and federal minimum wages to a real wage, a living wage. It's strengthening the right of unions to organize in the workplace. It is making child care and child care tax credits more available to more families. It's expanding unemployment insurance. These are all work-centric ideas. In other words, for those who are working, give them a chance to do better. There are a bunch of other things we need to do, but that are not central to what we're doing. But I believe that we can, particularly if we combine that with universal health care, changing our housing policy in America, being willing to put more money into affordable housing, both ownership and rental housing, making access to college simpler. I mean, we really, literally could eliminate poverty as we know it, and every American would benefit from it.
That's the key to making the point, that every American would benefit from it, because the stark fact of the matter is poorer people, for complicated reasons that you probably understand better than any other audience, poorer people do not vote at the same rate as richer people, and therefore politicians often have the impulse to ignore them.
Well, the politics are complicated because what has happened in America is courageous leaders. Bobby Kennedy, who's one of my political idols, but not just Bobby Kennedy, LBJ, others, led the war on poverty that began in the 1960s, which has been much vilified. The truth is the war on poverty cut the poverty rate in America in half in the course of about a decade. Now, that's not to suggest we didn't do anything wrong. Anytime you do something big and bold, you're going to make a few mistakes, and we made some. But we can learn from those and make changes. And because of the war on poverty, by the way, we have Medicare, we have Medicaid, we have early childhood education, we have the Elementary and Secondary Education Act. We have a whole group of laws that have had huge benefits for America, for me, myself, as a matter of fact. So we did things that work, but we got to take those things and expand on. But what happened was, you remember Reagan, welfare moms, all that stuff. Basically what it did is it put fear into the hearts of politicians who no longer wanted to talk about it. They don't like to just listen. Listen to political leaders in America today. They don't even like to use the word. They're afraid to use the word poverty. That's the reason you have to talk. You have no idea how many times I've heard, from political consultants, you have to talk about the middle class. You can say inequality, you can't use the word poverty. Well, the hell I can't. Yeah, I can. If in fact we have people living in poverty in America, yes, I can say it. It's the truth. When you speak the truth, there's a certain power associated with that.
But there's also certain power in broadening the pitch, explaining to middle-class people who feel also, particularly right now, very insecure, that they could be part of this process. They could benefit from these changes.
It is true. I mean, if you look at when we've had real growth in this country, real sustainable economic growth, it's not complicated. We've sort of broadened the foundation for that economic growth. We have strengthened the middle class, and we've lifted millions of people out of poverty. That's when we've had real and meaningful and sustainable economic growth. You cannot sustain, if you just picture this in your mind's eye, you cannot sustain just putting all of that growth in the top 1 or 2%, which is what we've had over the last 7 or 8 years. It doesn't work. And what we've seen over the last 8 years, although it's gone on longer than that, you can't just say it's happened in the last 7 or 8 years. What's happened is we've had real economic growth. It is empirically true, but it's almost entirely concentrated in the people at the top. And there's a lot of reasons for it. Bush and his policies have played a significant role. Globalization has played a role. But the bottom line is we have got to lift people out of poverty, strengthen and grow the middle class in order to benefit all Americans economically.
We're having this discussion at a point where a lot of headlines about just how bad the U.S. economy is right now. many of you may have seen on our show, we had a piece out of Alabama not too long ago. They have a quite regressive taxation system in Alabama. Among other things, they put sales tax on groceries. And we had a wonderful family that we profiled that had to make weekly choices between getting a bagel and buying milk. But Callie Green was the mom's name. There's a sweet, very honest moment in our piece. Our cameras caught this, where she says, we keep reading about recession, and everybody on Wall Street upset, but my people, she says, we've been in recession all our lives. And people really feel that...
She probably doesn't think it's a mental recession.
She doesn't think it's a mental recession. She's had needs that are not being met by society for a very long time. That said, is it tougher now that the economy more widely is seen as being in such tough shape? It's harder to make the pitch. You go to a middle-class person and say, help poor people. They're like, help me. I can't, even put gas in my car.
It is harder, but that's why this case for everybody being connected is central to the concept. If what you're saying to them is, I know you're struggling, but help these people out of benevolence and the goodness of your heart, and that alone, that's a hard case to make when people can't pay their bills, they're paying over $4 for a gallon of gas, et cetera, trying to send kids to college. If, on the other hand, they believe that the long-term financial security of their family is connected to the long-term financial security of every family in America, that's a different equation.
A lot of people here specifically thinking about the idea of building a movement, and you've already alluded to it. Is that how you build a movement? You cast the net very broadly. You pick up even upper middle class people who are feeling economically insecure.
Well, I can tell you what I think. I don't know that I'm right about this, but I can tell you what I believe. I believe that first, national leadership is absolutely required. It cannot be done without it. I wish it could. It'd be great. It doesn't mean you can't do great things in communities and in certain regions, but if you actually want to have a serious national movement for this kind of change, it requires national leadership. It requires somebody or a group of people that Obama, for example, could do it. It requires somebody who goes on television and American people say, I know that person, I should listen to what they have to say. Because without it, what you have are segmented efforts being engaged in by good people who really care and are deeply committed in various places around the country, but they're never going to be comprehensive, they're never going to be connected to each other without national leadership. I mean, that's why, when people say, well, why haven't we done anything meaningful about poverty in America in the last 20 years? Because there has not been any sustained national leadership. Without it, it can't be done. That's why the war on poverty was a real and meaningful national effort to do something about this cause. And it's the kind of effort we need today.